It's really awesome to have so many very bright minds in one single room, and every year I always walk away with something. Last year, what I walked away with from this economic summit was Rob Bernardi from Cocoa USA saying to us that continuing education was like a forced march. We got to keep learning, and certainly in this economy, continuing to adapt and adjust. And while we can't see in the crystal ball, to be able to try to project what we do see happening. And that's why we're very fortunate to have our four panelists here with our discussion focus on building local business. You'll notice that it's got a certain flair to it. You'll hear about banking. That has been a tremendous upheaval and opportunity in our community, as we all know, the real estate and the construction and development phases, but also to take a look at retail. And the hope is that as you have questions, to jot them down, that we'll leave enough room for Q&A if you have specific questions about best practices or looking for resources. A lot of what we're trying to do is connect you. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will begin. I'm going to go ahead and just introduce our first speaker, Mike Bomar, who is president of the Columbia River Economic Development Council. He's previously served as director of the Southwest Washington Contractors Association, and he is helping to retain good businesses, recruit new businesses, and help encourage targeted industries in our magnet area. And he hears a lot from what businesses are experiencing, what they need. And will you help kick off? And please welcome Mike Bomar.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you also to the Columbian for putting this on today. I know for me it's been very informative, and it's great to have this discussion as a community. So as I move through my career here, I'm finding myself further and further in the future, which provides a lot more uncertainty, but at the same time it's really exciting to see what is going on and what the potential is for our community. Wanted to give you a brief snapshot of some of the activities specifically related to development and construction that we saw in 2013 that I think will help us understand what we can expect for 2014. The two big things that we saw that really stuck out to me in tracking building permits was land divisions, which then sets the stage for subdivisions of residential housing. But also a really key thing that we saw was multifamily, and you're seeing some of that off the ground already, along with some hotel work. That I think there's 3 active hotel projects going on right now. So multifamily construction in response to really high demand and increased demand for rental units certainly is responding to that. And also on the residential side, some pent-up demand there that's starting to play out. I see some potential for really what we call kind of micro bubbles. I don't think we're going to get back to the boom or the bubble that we saw previously, but as we kind of sort out market versus demand here, I think you'll see some waves up and down over the next couple years as a lot of these opportunities come onto market at once to respond to that demand. So that's what I see from the residential side, and really some of that to be cautious of, I guess, is you have a generation or a generational impact of folks that are really starting to question what used to be automatic at a certain point in their life of, do I need to buy a home, or what is the true value of home buying? And I think that for us in the business, we still understand the fundamental value of that, but there'll be some shock to get over for those folks. You also have the aging demographic, and I think the quality builders that we have locally here are responding well to that and providing a great product for that group as well. So those are the 2 driving factors I think you'll see in home building for this next year. Some of the things I wrote about in my brief that I won't go too in-depth into, but happy to respond to in question and answer. Transportation package that we're working on at Economic Development Council with our business association partners is extremely huge. Couple key thoughts on that, though. One is the infrastructure itself and what that does as far as providing opportunities for job growth in the future is key. Both maintenance operation and capital improvements. We're at a point now where we need to make some very important decisions about how we're going to invest for the next generation and opportunities in the future. The other is really the shape of our local economy. I know Kevin Tapany is here, a new CRDC board member, but the public works investment, we're seeing the opportunities in public works to go down, and without a reinvestment in that, not only does that have an impact on our long-term job growth, but also we have a strong contingent of folks that do great public works throughout the region here locally, and that certainly is going to have a labor impact, and we want to make sure that we understand that, both from the jobs perspective, but also the long-term impact. Public Works Trust Fund, so that got rated last year as part of the McCleary response for education funding. That has a big impact on our ability to fund infrastructure going forward. We're lucky that we had a few slip through before the fund went away completely. But what that really means is really a doubling in cost for infrastructure, and what that ultimately means for ratepayers and our ability to respond and grow from a utilities perspective as the demands increase going forward here as well too. So we're working hard on looking at opportunities to refund that. It's a significant challenge, and I don't think we have the answer for that yet. But that's something that we're certainly pushing on the state to really understand the impact of those funds not being available. The third key component of what we're working on from a policy perspective is really the 2016 comp plan. And one of the encouraging things I see in the 2016 seems like it's getting closer and closer every day. But really the hard work and the important work is being done right now with respect to the numbers. There's a lot of formulas and numbers that go into the assumptions that at the end of the day drive whether or not you and your individual parcel can be developed a certain way and what opportunities we have for growth. So we're working hard with our business development partners, and I see a lot of collaboration that really hasn't been there or to this level in the past, in keeping all of those different perspectives at the table. And I'm very optimistic that we'll continue that throughout the process, which ultimately will give us a better product as far as how that gets tested and what opportunities will be available relative to the demand that we see. Wanted to give you a snapshot. CRADC, some really encouraging news on the recruitment front right now. We have, in 2012, we had a lot of expansion activity going on, but zero actual business recruitments that we were able to count in. Last year we had 8 total. The biggest of those was Integra. You had about 500 employees that are looking at moving over here now, and that's a big deal. And we talked a little bit about those big fish and the impacts that those have on multipliers. That's a lot of what we do, is really working as a community to have those really game-changing opportunities be realized here. We also, this year, have a couple big wins that we're excited to announce already in January. Forgive me with my CIA secret agent kind of style in reporting these out, but for respecting companies, first one is Project Jellies, and some of the key components of that: 30,000 square foot building, 25 full-time employees, $5 million capital investment. The second one is Project Chuck Taylor. So if there's fashion fans out there, you might understand these shoe references. I don't. But that one's a 50,000 square foot facility, 40 new employees, $20 million capital investment. And in addition to that, we have a lot of activity that we can't confirm yet that we are very optimistic about this year in hitting both our job numbers, knocking those out of the water. But really what we're seeing is an overall trend. A lot of business headquarters looking at relocating here, quality of life, and that speaks to some of the works that a lot of our community partners have done and continue to do. Food distribution, manufacturing, activity with the Innovation Partnership Zone, but a lot of activity going on right now, and I think the key is continuing to work together to make sure those things come to realization.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So that was introductory remarks, and then we'll get into some good Q&A. Think about some things that you'd like to talk about or ask questions of. We'll have time. Our next speaker can help us understand better the bank's role in helping to build local business, and it doesn't even really need to be said what happened 6 years ago. Was it only 6 years ago? It feels like a lot longer when we all know what happened, and bridge gap loans and everything was frozen, and it felt like it was just the worst of possible times to ever try to look for any kind of capital, which we know is a primary need of all businesses to be able to build. Lisa Dow is our Senior Vice President for Credit Administration for Columbia Bank. She's worked 11 years in banking with Security Pacific and Bank of America in San Francisco, followed by a short stint of 20 years, that's a joke between us, in Vancouver with the Bank of Vancouver, West Coast Bank, and now Columbia Bank. Please welcome Lisa Dow.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I've seen my share of acquisitions, so if you ever want to have a drink with me and talk about it, I'd be happy to. It's a learning experience. So what I thought I'd do today is just break my comments into sort of 3 categories. 1, just the backdrop of the banking industry in general. 2, talk about the impact here locally, and then talk a little bit about what's your banker looking for when you come, when you when you have that conversation, what's in the back of their mind. And I said this in the first session too, I also want to lead with, really, truly, not all bankers are bad. No matter what you hear, not all bankers are bad. We're pretty involved in the community. We got kids and a dog and all that too. So really, all bankers are not bad. But the industry really, as Kelly mentioned, has really changed. Our industry, probably like many of yours, has changed dramatically over the last 6-7 years, although, as I'll close with, some things have really stayed the same. You see many fewer banks nationally and locally. We're down to under 7,000 banks nationally, up from a peak of about 11,000. And you see that impact here, as Kim Capilotto nicely said, more than one time. There's really only one community bank here locally, which is much different than when I moved here and when I lived here earlier in my lifetime. But so what does that mean for all of us? Well, and really why, I guess, first of all. The why of that is we had some banks fail. There was a lot of bad loans made, and for whatever reason, some of them failed. And so to really counter that, we've had now a big slew of new regulatory guidance that we all have to follow, and that's really become an overwhelming burden to the industry, and I can't emphasize that enough. The cost of being a bank, just opening your doors, is extreme right now, and it's sort of like how we all often work. We go kind of to the lowest common denominator. If one person did it and then two people did it, then pretty soon we say, well, everybody must have done it, so you now all must do this, this, and this. And so when you talk to a banker today, the first thing that sort of comes to mind in terms of what we're talking about is compliance with all those regulatory guidances. It's not enjoyable, but it's the necessary evil today. So that's why you're getting pieces of paper with all these generic things on them, and the disclosures you used to get were 1 page, now they're 10 pages. It's really to try to keep up with the regulatory guidance. So if you ever want to have a say in that, I think you should, that's my only political pitch here, is that there are unintended consequences to some of the things that we've done. And so as a result, there's fewer banks in this community today. And you're going to see banks that are now a little bit more niche focused, because the margin of our business is now very skinny, and banks have a lot of money to lend and are trying to find ways to deploy that capital, but deploy it in such a way that that's paid back. And that's sort of fundamental to our business, but not always well understood and sometimes criticized. But you'll see more niche players, different banks really starting to specialize in different areas, and I think that's a great thing. Just like we see in other industries, being a jack of all trades is really not always the best thing to be. So you're going to see, I think, increased focus in that way. Here locally, I do see money to lend. I see banks looking for opportunities and looking to build relationships, particularly looking at real estate, because our panel is really driven by that, as really is our community. When you look at Clark County and maybe why we were hit a bit harder in this economic downturn, it's really our exposure to the construction and housing industry. We've all talked about that a lot. So the things that I look at for this community really are things like, well, what are mortgage rates doing? Mortgage rates, 30-year mortgage rate hit a low of about 3.5%. We're now in the 4s, and I would expect that will go to probably the low 5s, high 4s by the end of this year. That's just sort of you start to see a little bit of pressure on long-term rates today. I would expect there will be a little bit of pressure on short-term rates, and short-term rates really drive many other types of financing, but because you've got so many lenders, you still got dollars to lend, so it's really supply and demand. There's money to lend, there's competition for those really great clients, and then there's sort of a gap in terms of, well, where do we go next? There's a lot of sort of spotty credit, both commercially and individually, and so everybody's trying to rebuild and come back. And the banks are really, I know people don't believe it, but the banks really do want to find a way to get the money out the door, because it's how we make money too, quite honestly, and it's what helps sort of the community, as Kim, I think, alluded to. part of what happens with a bank is if we lend money into the community, we see a more vibrant community, we make a little bit of money, and we reinvest it through sponsorships and other things. And I will say, and I want to make a plug for the banks in this community, I think the banks in this community have done a fabulous job being engaged, both on an individual and a corporate level. So I would expect that will continue even if headquarters are located in places outside of Vancouver. So beyond that, I guess, a couple things. One is on the commercial real estate side of things, money, again, is coming out the door. There's competition for a lot of good, solid projects. Where money's been slower to come back into the market has been in real estate development. But I'm starting to see that, and I think those dollars will continually become more available over the next 12 months for, I'm starting to see money available for not only what I would call pre-sold housing, but also some spec housing. Different price points, and Carol will talk about it, because we try to follow just as the builder and the realtor tries to follow what's going to sell. So you're starting to see money coming out of banks for that type of financing. Where I think it will be a little slow to come out will be for site development, residential spec land purchases, and we did see a pullback for multifamily construction because that seemed to really get overheated there for a while. But that money seems to still be out there. So what I'm going to close with is just what, when you talk to a bank, what's a banker looking for? And as I prepared my comments and I was looking at things like, how's our industry changed and how's technology influenced it, it's very interesting. We talked a little bit about this last session too. Sometimes the fundamentals really are key, like cash. But really, for a banker, when you get into this industry, you learn the 5 C's of credit. And the first C is character and communication. And I can't stress that enough. If you're working with a lender, or you're thinking about working with a lender, and you're thinking about making an acquisition, whether it's real estate or you're buying a business or you're changing your business line, getting that communication and that dialogue going early is just critical. We can be such a much better partner to you. Thinking about working in an advisory capacity or having your professional partners working with you in an advisory capacity. We have a couple of borrowers that do a great job of putting on an event once a year, and they invite their bankers, their insurance agents, their attorneys, whomever else is critical to their business, sort of for a summit to give an update as to what they do and how they do it, and I found it to just be invaluable. We look at capital. We look at, do you have skin in the game? Are you participating in this venture with us, or is it just solely looking for bank financing? And I think bankers are still looking for skin in the game. Capacity, what's the ability to repay? Do you stress test your own business? How are you looking at, what if plan A doesn't go well? What's plan B? What's secondary? What if plan A doesn't work? Is there collateral available? And then lastly, we look at the condition. What's the economic climate? And so my plug with that will be, get involved with your EDC, with your chamber. They're great bellwethers of what's going on in the community, and they can really help you to drive your business. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So if you look at opportunities and challenges, a great case in point might be the 192nd Avenue corridor, where we have seen lots of growth as of late. I can barely see the barn anymore. We're going to ask Tom Smith, who's a designated broker at Columbia Pacific Commercial Properties in Vancouver, to give us some of his insights on what worked well that we might be able to borrow in our own businesses. But also, I think I'm going to hear that a little bit of spec is going to be involved, and some risk taking is going to be involved. His company specializes in sales and leasing a Class A office. Please welcome Tom Smith.
Well, thank you very much, and I am honored to be on this panel today. There's a lot of perspectives, and mine is pretty narrow. When you talk about development, commercial development or economic development in an area, one of the first lessons that you really learn is being in the right place at the right time. Does that make sense? And the reality is right now in Clark County, there's probably 2 spots geographically that are really important. One is the Salmon Creek-Felida area, and the other is over on the 192nd corridor. You probably heard, read in the newspaper about two individuals, developers named Mr. Tom Files and Mr. Dean Kirkland. They've developed, or are in the process of developing, just about 1 mile of that corridor from 15th on 192nd down to about 25th. You know, and that development really started out as a pretty typical private standalone development. But the site was going to be impacted by the City of Camas improvements. But what really it has evolved to is become a joint venture with the City of Camas, with the City of Vancouver, as well as these private developer individuals. If you've been over at 192nd Corridor recently, you probably recognize that 20th has gone through all the way out to Prune Hill. Well, that's going to change the complexion of that area drastically. In fact, it's estimated by the City of Camas that that intersection of 192nd and 20th ADT, or average daily trips, will increase to about 40,000, where right now it's about 20,000. The other thing that's interesting is it has led, or in part, was the Fisher Investment Group that went into that 200-acre, about 150 acres of developable property right there off of 20th, between 20th and 34th. In fact, that area has grown so much. There was a quote that I caught from the City of Vancouver's Economic Development Plan individual, where she stated, "The 192nd Avenue corridor is one of the premier employment and housing clusters in the region. This area is primed for major expansions in professional services and advanced manufacturing industries, which leverage the significant presence of existing high-tech cluster and newcomers such as Fisher Investments and Peace Health Medical." So we see that happening right now in that corridor. Obviously, the second lesson that you learn in commercial development is go with the flow, because you never want to push too hard, especially when you've got private and public coming together. It takes a certain respect of all parties to really bring a development together. And the intersection of real estate, land use, and economic development brings together both that public and private sector. And the most successful developments are really done when those two come together and converge. But having said that, there's a little story that comes to my mind as I've been involved with development over the years, and that is the story about the scorpion and the frog. Have you heard that story? You remember that story? Well, the story goes like this. There's a scorpion and a frog at the edge of the stream, and they both need to get across. No problem for the frog, right? But scorpion, it's a little bit of an issue. So the scorpion looks over at the frog, and he makes this proposition. "You let me climb on your back, you take me across, I promise not to sting you." Well, the frog, being a nice guy, considers, says, "Okay, hop on." So they get about 3/4 of the way across. The scorpion stings the frog. The frog starts to go into paralysis, and he's going down. The last breath he gasps is, "Why?" Well, the scorpion responds, "It's my nature." Now, I'm not casting dispersions here or suggesting which one of those private or public sectors is the scorpion or the frog, but the reality is it does take cooperation, and oftentimes they do interact just that way, like a scorpion and a frog. Fortunately, on this corridor, though, that's not happening. It really is becoming a joint venture that's working out well. So how does that corridor add to employment growth? Well, if we take a look at basic employment or base employment, it usually is reflected by those companies that bring import or export services into an area. So you generally think of a big company that's producing something and exporting all that out and has to have employees, jobs are created to create that. But we look at Fisher Investments, and really it is a base employer. Most of the people in this room are not serviced by individuals who work at Fisher's Investment. They are servicing people all over the U.S. and maybe all over the world. Because of that, and I just talked with Jim, who's a regional manager, Jim Stevens, who was here at the earlier session, he says they're already at 600 employees between those two buildings, which is pretty impressive. Well, what does that mean in terms of total employment? Well, there's usually a factor of 3 to 4. So those individuals who work at Fisher Investments, they need barbers, they need dry cleaners, they need all of those services, and that can be 400 employees for every 100 employees. So we can see how exponentially a base employer like that can really bring in more employment. And that's exactly what's happening on that corridor. The issues having to do, though, with that corridor and how much money is going out of it is pretty great. And it's a combination of things, as we see it. Part of it is just the amount of services that are available, and therefore we've got about 175,000 square feet of retail office space slated to build out in that 1 mile corridor, as well as multifamily and hotels. So we're going to continue to expand in that regard. And Kelly's standing up, which means that I've got to shut up here pretty quick. So,
But we'll continue in Q&A. Please
yes,
thank Thomas.
I understand. So,
I'm sorry, Tom.
okay, I'm done. Your turn.
Sorry, Tom. So we talk about clusters more and more in this new economy, the importance of partnerships. I've been hearing that. I watched Phil. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Carol Curtis, who is a longtime community resident and a do-gooder in general, and also a broker for Windermere Stellar Group. She's been in the real estate profession in Clark County since 1980, and we really have seen such a tumultuous change within the real estate market. And the one thing that we learned very quickly is that when one industry begins to go down, the other cluster sub-industries in that circle, in the constellation, they go down too. So as things start to kind of pick back up in real estate, what will that mean for all of our folks that are at title companies and brokerage houses? Certainly lots has changed. But please, for some introduction remarks, welcome Carol Curtis. Thank you.
Well, everybody likes to talk about real estate. I spend a lot of my time on the street, virtually visiting with folks, whether they're homeowners or not, business people, and of course they know I'm in real estate, and so how's the real estate business? And of course the stock answer for a realtor is supposed to be wonderful, it's great, time to buy, time to sell. Well, it hasn't been that much fun over the last few years to give that kind of response, because it wasn't really an honest response. So I learned, and I have by being in the business for so long, just, be honest, but still be optimistic. And I think being optimistic has kept me in the business all these years. We went through some painful times, and while the banks can be our friend, they're not necessarily our enemy, but they were involved in so many of our transactions over the last few years, since 2008, when the bubble kind of burst. We had more banks involved on the seller side than we did, well, we had to have one on the buyer side, but they got in our way a little bit, and those were called short sales, and we've got, those have washed through the system pretty well. A lot of them were in the under 200 to 250 price range, and they had attracted a lot of new-time home buyers, first-time home buyers, because of the price range and that affordability factor. But interest rates, traditionally, I never thought I would see this type of interest rate in my career. When I started here, it was at 16% mortgage rates. So I thought I'd never see single digits. Well, now seeing that what might sneak up to be 5%, that's okay. We can still make it work at 5%. We're at historic lows. So what happened, though, is you're introducing a first-time home buyer into a process where his best prospects for a home is a short sale. And a short sale means that you're negotiating with that first mortgage or to negotiate the price of that home. So you start them into a process that could be months, and you don't even know really what the final price is going to be. So I'm not going to go into great depths about the short sale, but it really impacted our market because it affected all the other traditional sales out there. People who just wanted to sell their house because they thought it was time to move, they needed to move, and it just interrupted the whole process. And then, of course, all the REOs, which are the real estate-owned properties as a result of foreclosures. So all of that really muddied up the water. Well, those are pretty much washed through. I just noticed, though, on the RMLS stats, there are 335 pending short sales. They can go on for, the first 6 months of this year, however. But they'll wash through, and when they do, that'll be kind of the remnants of our bubble burst. And I think that'll be really healthy. So that's the good news. The other good news is that there are new lots coming online. And it's a little startling when you see the tagline on my perspective when I had to submit my comments to the Columbian early, thousands of new lots. Well, not to be alarming, there are thousands out there that were kind of in the holding pattern when 2008 hit, and they kind of went on ice for a while. Now they are being rolled out. They're being in their final stages, but believe me, the developers, the builders, everybody's cautious. They're not going to throw all these out on the market all at once. They're going to figure it out. They've replatted some of them, which is another piece of good news, because the other concern I have is that we do not have good listing inventory right now, not a good healthy listing inventory. Many of what we do have out of the 1,600 plus just active listings of residential properties, there's a couple hundred that are builder construction that aren't constructed yet, so they're not really something you can move into. They're going to be built. So we've had to separate those out from our stats, because people who are going online and searching, which is what they do now, they see these renderings or a as-built like this one, and so they see a house, but it's not really even out of the ground yet. So the caution of builders, I think, will be lifted a little when the banks become a little more participatory about giving them construction loans for the spec houses. So we're seeing a lot of really good evidence that this next year is going to be better. I made a real emphasis on the baby boomer, and the reason for that is there is a bubble of baby boomers in our community too that we want to keep here, but they're having difficulty finding the type of house they want, because they would like to shed themselves of the larger home that they raise their family in, 2 stories. They want a main level or a master on the main, but they know what they want. They want quality. They want a quality neighborhood. We're just going to struggle to find them what they want, because if they don't move, they don't open up their house to the growing family from the first-time home buyer. It's a cycle of ownership, and I'm hoping that Mike's prediction that the young people just won't want to buy because they've been scared because of what's happened to their families. I think there's some truth in that. There's a lot more caution, and I don't see any students in here, but I just caution them on an important number to really watch as they get out of their educational and into their jobs, is watch those FICO scores. That's as important as your SAT scores and your GPAs and all that. That's important because it's a driver for when you get an apartment or when you want to get your new home. It's going to be an important one, and that credit worthiness is going to be a big driver, as Lisa just spelled out.
Great start. Thank you very much. So do not be shy with the hands or finger. Oh, look at that. Paul Greenlee from the city of Washougal, ask your question, please.
I see Ron Oslo was back there also, and of course Camus has been very responsive. All of the small cities, we believe that we have become much more responsive and much easier to work with. If that's not true, I would certainly like to know that. But then going beyond that, what more can we do to help things along?
Sure. And then
And I'm not saying this because a lot of the cities are my bosses now, but I will say, having worked in the construction development side, certainly during the downturn, whether it's a culture thing or a necessity thing, the cities became very business friendly. And some of those were, and I think Washougal was one of them prior to that as well. The challenges that we see with the small cities right now is not really about culture or policy. It's more about capacity. And as cities like Ridgefield and others are ramping up on these residential developments, it's about how you handle the capacity and those big influxes at any given time. And so that's what, as far as working with our jurisdictional partners from a development side, I think that's going to be key going forward, is how do we continue to have that discussion so that we can be flexible to these kind of many ebbs and flows that come through. And being frank as well, I think that the local level has, for a long time now, been a great partner of business community across the board. We do face challenges at the state level and the federal level, and it's not just putting it off on some other agency, but certainly it continues to become restrained on the options that local government has to be helpful. And so from that standpoint, it's important that we have that dialogue at both the state and federal level about that local impact, not only globally how it's affecting all businesses, but us locally specifically here as well.
Thanks, Paul. Comment I had heard from the earlier session. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, so appreciate that comment very much. And so I'm a broker, and I deal a lot with leasing, with retail and office. And one of the issues that would come up often is when a tenant moves into a new space not yet built out, or one that is second generation. What do they do to make sure that whatever the municipality is, that they've cleared it? And I was honored to be on a panel with a group that worked with the county, and I was amazed at the open-mindedness on the part of those individuals to correct things. Washougal is not one of my venues. I focus pretty much in the Vancouver market, but the reality is I agree with Mike entirely. I think the issue now is not structural, it is more capacity. And, you know, they just had to shrink. You all had to shrink to survive. And now you're so small with the economy expanding, it's that issue. But I really appreciate knowing what is required of a broker or a broker's client as they go into space or develop projects. And that sometimes has been the big mystery.
Thank you. So we are looking for business ideas on how our small businesses and our medium-sized businesses can expand. Those who constricted and those who restructured and did what they did to survive are now trying to build up. Challenges that are facing small businesses or businesses in general. Sorry, you can always tell my chamber bent on things when I say small businesses. The federal definition of a small business is less than 500 employees, which is crazy. But I'm curious. I know that I have businesses that are looking for employees who have hybrid job responsibilities, that they're a bookkeeper and maybe they also can do some HR. Maybe they also can do some desktop publishing. More and more, I'm needing 2 or 3 specific skill sets within the same person. And I'm curious from over at the EDC perspective, what are you finding that employers need?
Well, I think that's certainly the case across all sizes of businesses as far as what type of employees we're looking for. One of the challenges, we talked a little bit about clustering, and a lot of it is about knowing who we are as a community as to what type of businesses we can attract or how an existing business can expect to grow. I saw Commissioner Hankey in here earlier about that reliable power is one of the key assets that we have as a region, and also quality of life. So those types of employers that really benefit from those and our existing tax structure are the ones that have the best opportunities for growth. That said, it's a challenge from a workforce standpoint, and that's one of the things that we've been really blessed to have that opportunity to work with our education partners and our workforce development partners, is how do we continue that pipeline so that when we're recruiting, either it's a Fisher Investments type of company or a high-tech company into the area, that there's not just a shift of the employees from the existing folks to the others. So we really want to create a good pipeline, and that takes the entire system working together for employees coming in, and that will help our recruitment efforts. So workforce is certainly a challenge, but on the upside, I think we've already positioned ourselves to start having better outcomes there, and I think that continued partnership will yield results as well too. So that's a key thing, and we talked a little bit about policy, but consistency is another thing. We work closely with Greater Portland Inc. and talking about some of the businesses from outside the area looking in, and even more than the actual fee structure or the policies that are in place, it's really about predictability for a business if they're taking a risk in the time and investment in looking at locating here or growing here. So it's really important to have across political changes to be able to have some consistency in what businesses can expect.
Okay. Comments or questions? Randy.
If I was here, we would have had Nike. I mean, that's the bottom line. Just kidding. Yeah, just kidding.
And Aaron has left the room, the reporter.
Yeah, no, just I know it's on video too. No. So one of the things that we've been working on with our partners across the river too is how do we compete professionally as communities? And we talked a little bit about the opportunity for Vancouver to be really an important, unique aspect of the Portland MSA. And currently the structure is set up for us and for folks coming in and looking at the area to be able to play off communities and try to drive us against each other. And I'm not speaking specifically to Nike, but what I'm saying is that there's some structures in place that really put some strain on our abilities to cooperate as a community to be able to take advantage of the greatest potential opportunity for the region. Vancouver, as I think I mentioned earlier, has a lot of potential for a corporate headquarters, and I don't think that structurally we've fully taken advantage of the opportunity to market that. But certainly, in speaking with Jim from Fisher earlier, the employees wanting to come here, along with the executives and the opportunities that they have, the choices that employees in kind of this new knowledge-based economy have to be able to locate here are really strong assets for the area, and I think that we need to really take advantage of that. Certainly we have competition across the river, and there's legitimate competition, but certainly our tax structure, our quality of life lend us to be able to land those things in the future. So we're taking lessons from that and other areas that we aren't successful at and saying, how do we as a community improve not only what we have, but how we talk about what we have as a community.
Yes, in the back.
So that's a good question, and actually I was mildly involved with one of the developments, commercial developments right off the freeway there that just sort of stalled out. CRA's got it listed. You know, the bottom line is you've got a lot going for you. I think you're just undiscovered. So you remember my opening comments, the right place, the right time, okay? And I think you guys need to be patient. I think you're sitting on a wonderful spot, and I think you're on the I-5 corridor. You know, the main town just off of it is a little bit off the beaten path, so that it's a little bit more difficult. But you guys had so much residential lot development plotted. It's just ready to sprout. So, you know, there's got to be. So I'm big. I'm 61 years old now, and I'm big on the notion of sustainability. Okay, so you can do all sorts of things to economically incentivize development. But if it's not sustainable, who cares? If the people go into foreclosure in 3 years on their houses, if all the tenants that went into a commercial development fold within 2 years on a 10-year lease, who cares? You know, the reality is it's got to be the right time. So that may not be the answer you were looking for, but that is truly, so was it Ron that said, you know, some of the areas, one of the main speakers, John, I guess, he said it's luck. Sitting in the right place at the right time, it's luck. I think Ridgefield is ready to bloom. I think it's just, it hasn't quite blossomed yet. That's my impression.
I'm going to make just one comment, knowing that we now have our regional wastewater system in place. It's called the Clean Water, Clark County Clean Water. What's it called? Discover Clean Water Alliance. Well, it's morphed over time, but its time now is for people to realize that they can do a lot more out there because that infrastructure was lacking, and that was the biggest piece that was lacking. And so I think you're almost there.
If you have a question, please bring it forward right after. It is 10:45, and I apologize, but I want you all to be out and back to your jobs. Please give a big round of applause for our panelists. And they'll stay here for a few minutes so you can come up and talk about some of the issues. And thank you all for being here today for the Economic Forecast Breakfast.